Sorry, I was just trying to see if my camera would come on. Let me.
Yeah, why don't we do that profile picture thing?
I'm sorry. I sort
Okay.
of.
We are live. It is September 5th, 2025. It is the Prospect Weekly Roundup. We do this every Friday. It is our roundup of news and events from around the nation. I'm David Dayen, the executive editor of the American Prospect. And we have two people here today. It may look like we have one person here today, but we actually have two. We're having some technical difficulties with the video on one of our guests, Bryan McMahon, who's a freelance journalist. And we also have Dylan Gyauch-Lewis, who is a researcher at the Revolving Door Project. Thank you both for being here. Both of them wrote some excellent articles for the Prospect that are on the website about artificial intelligence. And we're going to talk about the economics of AI and also the politics of AI today. Bryan, I'm going to start with you. I know that we can't see your video right now, but we're going to go to you. You may see a black screen up there if you're watching at home, but it is, in fact, Bryan. We're working on that. So, Bryan, you wrote this article about. You pivoted off the fact that we had this new release from OpenAI of their GPT-5 product, which every successive version of ChatGPT, there has been some development, some increase in its function, and GPT-5 was more of a dud, right? So talk about what happened there, and maybe we can get into sort of the technical aspects of why this advance was not what was advertised.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I'm sorry, my video's not working here. But,
No problem.
yeah, so that's right. Last month, OpenAI, which is the most well-known and sort of seen as the leader in the AI space, they released their much-hyped model GPT-5. This is something that Sam Altman really hyped up over the last 2 years, writing in a blog, writing things in his blog like, we now know how to build artificial general intelligence as traditionally understood. And so this was supposed to be, as they said, a whale of a model to really show that this kind of exponential progress between models that we had seen before was continuing. And yeah, the release itself was a dud. He hyped this up for 2 years, and yet the biggest announcement of the model was less about anything that the model could do, or even the sort of benchmarking had been devalued, right? Every time they release a model, they brag about how good they are at math or coding or those things. And instead, the biggest announcement was about this sort of new functionality called a model router, which sort of automatically selects for users what level of AI model, what amount of reasoning, and what amount of computing resources go to it. And it's just not what people were hoping to hear. This had been hyped up again by Sam Altman specifically as not just another exponential increase, but really the big one. GPT-5 was supposed to be another huge leap forward in terms of capabilities.
Right.
And yeah, we just didn't see that.
And we were supposed to, get closer to, if not already arrive at, artificial general intelligence, or AGI. And you write in this piece sort of why we've kind of hit the wall. The idea, I guess, is that as long as we get more data, we're going to get a large language model that will be more sophisticated and able to create some manner of intelligence. But what you kind of indicate is that there's a diminishing returns to adding more and more data. Could you kind of explain that in layman's terms?
Yeah. So That's right. The basic idea, and OpenAI itself called in 2020 called this idea where if you throw more data and especially throw more GPUs, make the model itself a lot bigger, that as you do that, you just get these exponential increases in terms of what the model can do. But already back in maybe 2022, as Dr. Gary Marcus pointed out, there are already some signs of those sort of expected exponential gains
Mm-hmm.
were slowing down. And I think the release of GPT-5 really is the proof in the pudding that those sort of exponential gains have run out, right? So we'll still see
Right.
improvements as the model gets bigger, but that kind of almost magic quality that a lot of the projections are based on, where just as you put in more data and as the model gets bigger, it will always keep increasing at this exponential rate. That part has pretty definitively slowed down.
And there's kind of this thing where because the entire GPT kind of model, the kind of the whole idea, the fundamental idea is probabilistic, right?
Mhm.
This because it is kind of anticipating what the next word should be in order to answer a various prompt. This is what it doesn't have that sort of basic kind of tenet of learning or expressing a thought, which is what you're talking about, right? I mean that's
Right.
that's kind of the main problem that we have here with AI.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, these are, they're called hallucinations, which I think
Right.
kind of undersells the issue, right? Because it's not just that, they may get a fact wrong, or annoyingly, sometimes they'll completely make up a source. I don't know if that's ever happened to you guys. It's, you go to click
Yeah.
on something you've never heard before, and it turns out that it was just making it up. Um,
Right.
but yeah, so the way these large language models work, at their heart, they're probabilistic. Um, and so at some point, there is just always an element of uncertainty to these models. And the other part of the scaling laws sort of slowing down was that part
Mm-hmm.
of the argument was that those hallucinations would actually decrease or potentially go away as the models got smarter. But in fact, we've seen not very strong progress on it, and in some cases, the hallucinations increase between GPT-3 and GPT-4. When it was first released, the error rate for GPT-4 actually increased compared to older models.
Right.
Um,
Even though it had a lot more data
right,
that it was trained on.
right.
Very interesting. Okay, so there's this possibility that we've reached sort of the limits of where this kind of LLM, as structured, can go, and maybe there are other ways to get around that, and we will figure those out in the coming years. But for now, we maybe have hit a wall. And the important thing here is that the entire U.S. economy has bet on not hitting the wall, right? So, talk about sort of how much of our economy is now tied to this bet paying off, and what are the consequences if it doesn't?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talked about the scaling laws earlier, we talked about making the model bigger, right? And so that's actually been one of the biggest things driving NVIDIA's valuation to where it is today, is that people simply can't stop buying enough GPUs. But that was
Right.
sort of premised on this idea where there was no limit to how good a model could get over time if you kept throwing these GPUs at it. And so, yeah, as far as how it relates to the broader economy, I mean, as we saw with the job numbers that were released earlier today, I think you can see that
Mm-hmm.
outside of the big tech economy, there's very little bright spots right now.
Yeah.
And one of the sort of shocking stats that I saw was that um, capital spending by these big tech companies on these big AI data centers that are premised on AGI
Mm-hmm.
actually contributed more to GDP growth in the first 2 quarters of this year than all of consumer spending, which is shocking considering consumer spending makes up 70% of the U.S. economy.
Right.
Um,
And that's just right now,
right.
right? And because and the future spending that is expected for this AI build out based on this entire premise that may be wrong, that you have to have bigger data sets, bigger computing power in order to get closer to AGI. And your number was, I think there's something like $300 billion in AI build out, infrastructure build out expected this year. And then what is it between now and the next 3 years? That goes way up, right?
That's right. Yeah. So the numbers that are expected just to sort of complete the projections that go with AGI. So this isn't necessarily like new spending, but these are just to sort of complete the AGI build out. It's expected that there's going to be another $3 trillion spent between now and 2028. And by the
Right.
way, that $300 billion number surpasses in inflation adjusted terms how much was spent on the dot-com bubble at its peak as well.
Right. So this is like, to build the internet, we spent less money than we're spending in the infancy of building the infrastructure for AI, which may be built on a faulty premise. And
Exactly.
I want to bring Dylan in right now because uh, uh, it's not just that we're spending massive amounts of money on this thing, but it's what the impacts of that massive infrastructure build out are. So can you talk about this in just you can start with maybe the energy consequences, but there are also like public health consequences to this.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on. Um,
Sure.
so in terms of public health consequences, but I'll do it in the opposite order of what you asked. But
Yeah,
in
no
terms of
problem.
public health consequences, we're already seeing billions of dollars in increased treatment costs for higher rates of asthma, lung cancer, and other respiratory conditions,
Mm-hmm.
largely because most of the power generation being used by artificial intelligence data centers coming from fossil fuels, increasingly from coal and from burning methane. And that obviously causes emissions, including all the ones people know about, like carbon dioxide, but also more obscure ones like um, PM 2.5, which are tiny little particles that clog up your lungs. And just since between 2019 and 2023, over $5 billion in additional public health costs were already incurred because of this. It's ballooning currently. It went up 20% between 2022 and 2023, and it's projected to reach over 20 billion a year um, by
Right.
2030. And all of this is presuming current trends towards energy consumption. If we go towards the more outlandish claims, like Eric Schmidt says we need 99% of all energy going into AI, I would obviously explode this exponentially.
Yes, absolutely. And one thing that you point out in the piece that you co-author with Max Moran is that uh, it's not just that, okay, we're doing $20 billion a year in extra spending on these public health related maladies, and it's not evenly divided among rich states and poor states and rich areas and poor areas. This is actually targeted in such a way that the same people who have borne the brunt of disasters of public health in other contexts are now bearing it with respect to this data center build out.
Yeah, definitely. Memphis got a lot of attention over the summer because of XAI's plant there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a variety of reasons why this is happening, but we're increasingly seeing data centers cited in poor majority minority urban communities. Some of that has to do with these areas have industrial zone sites that you don't need to go through and rezone. A lot of it is um, governments are eager to give out tax breaks to incentivize investment,
Right.
um, and also being located close to existing energy infrastructure is a big plus. So for all of those reasons, it's exactly what you were just saying, and these same communities are getting hit with AI data center pollution a lot.
Right, because that's where some of these more noxious plants are already, and it's easy to hook up those to an existing grid and the existing data centers. And you mentioned the tax breaks. I mean, if you're talking about trillions and trillions of dollars of infrastructure spending that's borne by very large companies in the private sector, maybe that sounds like, oh, good, that's going to generate some economic activity. But what we know about data centers is they don't really create very many jobs, if any jobs. The result of what they're building is probably going to displace many more jobs than it creates, and the localities that are bidding on attracting these data centers are giving away massive tax breaks. So that would be the other way in which communities would benefit from large infrastructure spending, paid by the private sector. But we're not even getting the benefit of that because they've done all these tax abatements and incentives to draw in companies, which makes no sense to me because it's not there's not a jobs component. They're like, why are you bringing them in with no money attached? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I saw one story, I think in Indiana, where um, a data center was like touting its job creation, and someone did the math, and for like a handful of permanent jobs, the city, like small town, was going to be paying something like $8.5 million per job, and it would just be cheaper to pay people to sit on their thumbs at that point.
Right, exactly. And just to close the loop on the energy part of this, according to your story, AI is now responsible for about 1 to 2% of all global energy consumption. The airline industry is also responsible for that, for 1 to 2%. But even if you don't believe Eric Schmidt and that literally all energy or practically all energy has to be prepared for the AI build out, even like the more muted numbers here projects the industry to consume 21% of all energy by 2030, and that's why they're scrambling for any source that they can get, and not all those sources are renewable, right? You're they're pulling back coal plants and other plants that because they really need any energy they can get, and they need it right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this is where we kind of see the through line from Bryan's piece is the reason why they're building out such an energy intensive infrastructure is because it's basically premised on this notion of scalability. You
Right.
get continual exponential returns by funneling more and more resources into it. And I think Bryan said plenty, and I don't need to relitigate why that's maybe not the case. But because that is the approach, the political economic approach that Silicon Valley is settled on, you wind up with these incredibly energy intensive data centers being put all over the place. And they also tend to be clustered, which is why some of the effects are not evenly distributed. So, like,
Right.
there's a big cluster around Phoenix, there's a huge cluster in Northern Virginia, and there's a
Yep.
growing body of evidence that the huge surge in demand for electricity that's coming from all of this build out is resulting in spiking consumer electricity prices. Um,
And we've seen that. I mean, electricity for the consumer is going up right now at twice the rate of inflation. In some places, it's going up more like 10 times the rate of inflation, 20% increases in electricity, 25% increases in electricity. And this is a huge political issue and will be for the next several years, probably. So we'll get into the politics in a minute, but I want to bring Bryan back in. And Bryan, so we've set up this premise. This is a huge energy hog. This is they're building out this massive amount of money. They're making this huge bet, and the question is, at what point do investors sort of turn around and say, we made a bet that was premised falsely, and think might have to go in a different direction. So talk about sort of the business model. Maybe we can start with OpenAI, which is the sort of the technical leader in this industry. What does their business model look like, and how would they need to make it profitable?
Yeah, I think this is an important question that gets at the heart of, we were talking about how much money has been spent already. That's, we're spending as much as was spent on the internet. But when you dig into the numbers of these leading AI labs, they're not just not profitable, they're often getting further away from being profitable. So,
right.
For example, OpenAI last year lost $5 billion. This year, they reported that their annual revenue will be around $20 billion, although, the math can always be fuzzy with that number. But
okay.
even if they bring in $20 billion, they're expecting to lose $8 billion. And they're expecting to lose even more next year. They're expecting to lose $14 billion next year. And so, yeah, right. I mean, for now, it sounds like, they're almost, the way the economics is working, it almost sounds like they're losing $2 for every dollar that they spend. And
right.
Not only
and you write in your piece that they would need to clear $100 billion a year in revenue in order to even break even as
right.
a company, right?
Yeah, which, I mean, it's just kind of a shocking number, right? I mean, $100 billion is about a third of the revenue that somebody like Microsoft, the biggest company
right.
in the world, makes
right.
Every year. And that's just to break even, right? And so, yeah, the numbers.
We've definitely seen in the past investors, it's more the anomaly, but we've seen patient capital. Like, Amazon lost money for years, but it said, we're making this bet. We think that e-commerce is going to be a killer app, and just be patient with us and wait with us. And investors, by and large, did. But that's the exception. That's not really the rule. And Amazon didn't hit a wall where, it turns out people actually don't want to buy things on the internet anymore. Right? And so it's a different situation. And the revenue base of OpenAI, which I'm not sure entirely what it's based on, but there have been some. Right now, I guess it's a subscription model. That's where they make their money. But I have certainly heard that they now sort of keep profiles of people so that when their agents talk to people, they have knowledge of past events, of what they've prompted, and what their thoughts are, and things like that. And that's certainly valuable material for advertisers. So, we could see this just sort of the return to Web 2.0, where they build giant dossiers on people and then track them all everywhere they go and try to sell ads to them. But so maybe that's as profitable as Google. I don't know. But the problem is sort of in the near term. If investors, maybe there's a tipping point, right? Where they go from, okay, we're going to indulge this because we think this is the future, to, maybe this isn't the future. Maybe this is a nice to have, but not a must have in terms of a chat bot. And, at that point, how much are we sort of leveraged on this bet that AI is going to be this revolutionary technology?
Yeah, I think that is the question. I think one of the things that the GPT-5 release also showed for people was there wasn't really a new product being offered, right? In previous releases, they had sort of upgraded what the chatbot could do. First, it was, could help you write an essay. Beyond that, it could help you, do research or sort of knowledge work. But we haven't really seen them be able to branch out beyond just subscription for a chatbot model. And yeah, I think at some point, a lot of the investments that have been made are priced in this idea of AGI, right? I don't think
Yeah.
just having a chatbot is worth, OpenAI's most recent valuation now is $500 billion, right? I don't think that's what people are necessarily investing in. And so, yeah, the question is, if the bottom does fall out in terms of there being an AGI bubble, how does that affect the main economy, right? I mean, not just direct investments, but all of the magnificent seven companies that are sort of holding up the stock market
Right.
are all deeply implicated in this as well.
You're right that the Mag 7, and the Mag 7 is, I'm going to try to do it without even looking at your piece. It's Amazon, Facebook or Meta, Google, Microsoft, NVIDIA. There's two more here. I had them in my head. Who are the other two? Tesla. Okay.
And I don't know if you said Microsoft yet.
I did say Microsoft.
Amazon.
I did say Amazon, I think.
Amazon. Well,
I don't know. I missed one. Anyway, go read the piece. You'll see who the Mag 7 are. They are 34% S&P 500. That is an incredible weighting. Essentially, if you're buying one of these big index funds, you're essentially buying the tech industry. That is what a large chunk of stock market is essentially tech. And so if we have a problem in tech and suddenly we don't think we're going to get something out of it that is expected, we're going to have this huge drop off in not just the tech sector of the stock market, but basically the whole stock market.
That's right. Yeah. Like as you point out, 34% just in seven companies is a historic record. And as we mentioned, the spending on this sort of AGI dream is also what's holding up the stock market. So it's kind of a potential double whammy, if this bubble does burst. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, after your piece ran, I got an email from someone who's pretty knowledgeable in these things. And he says there's actually already evidence that the financial markets are looking skeptically upon AI plays for the first time. So a few months ago, XAI, which is Tesla's, this is Elon Musk's AI, his play. They did a debt financing a few months ago to fund the build out of data centers for its AI tool. And the interest rate was 13.5%. The junk bond rates right now are something about 8%. So the richest person on earth is borrowing at a junk standard plus 400 basis points, plus 4%, to try to build out. And now, 3 months later, all that cash has been burned through. And so now, XAI is going to have to borrow more in the markets at even higher rates. These are very leveraged bets, and they could easily all come crashing down if XAI suddenly doesn't have enough revenue, enough buyers to finance the servicing of the debt, let alone the principal. We could see a crash. And you talk about Tesla actually in the piece in a broader way, because Tesla as a company is seemingly leaving the car market that created the valuations that it has and moving to sort of the AI robot kind of market in ways that is very speculative and might run into the exact same problems that we're seeing in OpenAI and other things, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And just another little piece of evidence about the investors maybe becoming more skeptical. I know Meta's latest data center project. Before this, it had all been CapEx spending by the big tech companies, but I know Meta's latest build out is done partially with debt, which is also sort of another sign where people are less confident in the returns that they'll get from it. But yeah, so Tesla in the last 3 or 4 years, feels like it's a car company almost as a second thought, the way that Elon Musk talks about it. Since then, he's been pushing various forms of this kind of AI stuff, especially with the self-driving robo-taxis. And then in the last year, he's talking about potentially making a billion of these Optimus robots.
Right.
And so, yeah, Tesla stock has long been, sort of a leveraged kind of like, growth stock. But it is also in serious trouble. I mean, their car business has seen 6 straight quarters of declining sales and,
Yeah.
dropping revenue. And the Optimus robot is entirely speculative. And the full self-driving, depends how much you trust Elon Musk versus, NHTSA is also recently opening an investigation to see just how good of a driving the full self-driving cars are. So I think he is getting sort of desperate and looking for, again, this kind of story that he can tell investors of, a similar sort of growth explosion like what we saw with the internet. But I'm just not sure if it's right around the corner like he promises.
All right. I just want to be clear that just because we're not seeing Bryan's face doesn't mean he's a droid. It doesn't mean he's an Optimus robot himself. We're just having a technical situation. But I want to go back to Dylan because we've been talking about this in sort of one context, which is the remarkable gains of AI that we're expecting to see might not come to fruition, and therefore we have to talk about all these attendant problems around energy and how we've made this huge leverage bet. But we haven't really talked about AI in its own terms, like what we're dealing with right now. And you write in your piece about some of the revelations that we've recently seen about what this is doing to human learning potential, what is doing around social isolation and those kinds of things that, calls to question, like, even if this paid off, even if all this spending and all this data collection managed to create something really great for the human race, we'd still have these problems. So talk about sort of how AI is kind of perverting and warping the world that we live in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sorry if my voice is getting kind of funny. One of my vocal cords was damaged in surgery a few months back.
Oh, I'm
Um,
sorry.
oh no, it's fine. It
You sound
doesn't hurt or
fine. I mean,
anything. Okay,
you
great,
you sound fine. So
great. Um, yeah. So I think the subhead for the article that I co-wrote with my colleague Max is pretty spot on. AI is an oligarchy enriching, worker immiserating, energy depleting, brain rotting economic bubble.
right,
And I think all of that is very true. In the last couple of months, we've seen just really dystopian stories coming out, like how the Trump administration is moving to uh, deploy AI to deny uh, Medicare coverage for certain procedures.
right,
And key part of that story is that there's actually a financial incentive for the AI tools to deny more, which is that's the way that it's being set up, is it's explicitly
right,
getting rid of a human element so that you can block people's access to healthcare. Um, we've also seen multiple stories of AI basically egging on people's mental health crises. There was really tragic reporting um, in August about someone who was venting to ChatGPT about their suicidal ideation, and they said, "Does this noose look good?" And ChatGPT gave them tips on how to make a better noose. And the guy
right.
the guy said, "I want to leave this out so someone finds it and stops me." And ChatGPT said, "No, don't do that." So there's all of these horrific stories coming out. The day after that story broke, I think, there was another one that someone was basically encouraged by an AI chatbot to kill his mother and himself because it was validating his conspiracy theory that she was poisoning his food with psychedelic drugs. And this is not a brand new thing. There was a story in 2024 with very similar contours. There's been reporting on people turning to generative AI and chatbots more and more for mental health counseling. And I think what you and Bryan were talking about with being a probabilistic technology is key issue with that because
Yeah.
it creates an illusion of humanity, but
Right.
it's just plugging in answers in the order that it determines most likely to be resulting in a correct response. And that can have really tragic consequences here. And it's
Yeah.
also, there's more and more evidence coming out each month that it's also driving social isolation. People who talk to chatbots more feel more disconnected, and also that it's making us think worse. There was a study from MIT that showed continual use of a chatbot made your idea generation worse, your reasoning worse, your analysis worse continually. So when you add all of this up, we're creating, we're basically paying trillions of dollars to poison people's minds and their bodies and to create a society where everyone feels alone and hopeless.
Yeah.
And I question whether I, the thrust of the
You're
piece
always
is
you're always looking on the bright side, Dylan. That's what I like about you.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, my initial thoughts about AI, in terms of maybe being a labor saving device, maybe being helpful, and I use it very seldom. Very occasionally will when I exhaust the ability of DuckDuckGo, or which I use primarily, or Google. I'll go to a chat GPT to ask maybe one question. I've always thought of it as, okay, if this automation or AI or whatever, if it helps, increase worker productivity, that's probably a good thing as long as we all share in it. But I mean, that's the other part of this that I think I'd like you to talk about, which is, you know, we in a perfect world, there'd be an AI that would increase sort of the productive output of workers, and they would get the benefit from that. But the people who are dictating it are the same sort of merchants of addiction that we've seen over the Web 2.0 era, right? And there was this report that you mentioned in your story that Meta AI internally was saying its chatbot should engage in a sexual manner with children. And this, to me, this seemed like, okay, this sounds like Web 2.0 all over again. You want to get people addicted. You want to keep people on this product. I mean, it's extremely odd and disturbing that is supposed to be the way in which they do it. But you would see this sort of engagement at all costs kind of tactic and approach to using AI. And so, isn't that really the problem here? Is that we have the oligarchs who are going to benefit from this, not the actual individuals, not workers, not consumers, et cetera. And they're going to use it in a very particular way.
I don't know that I have much to say that you didn't already just cover.
Okay.
Um, but I think that's absolutely right. I think that particularly because of the incentive structures where there's huge upfront capital costs to all of this, there's kind of a perverse incentive to try and milk as
Right.
much use out of AI as you possibly can in order to recoup those costs. And I think that this is another reason why Bryan's point is super relevant is maybe if the productivity gains were actually able to continue apace, you might eventually see things like wage growth as a result of increasing productivity, which there's all kinds of problems with predicting that, but it's at least possible. But when you're hitting a wall and the industry becomes obsessed with keeping people using the tools, but it's not actually driving any productivity growth or technological advancement, or at least not to the same degree, then you wind up with a situation where really the only people who are reaping any rewards are the ones who are getting paid tons of money to build the products
Right.
and getting advantageous financing deals.
See, you did have something to say because that was very good. And I'm going to go back to you in a second for the political part of this and what Democrats maybe should do about it. But just right before that, Bryan, I want to bring you in again. And if we were to see the markets sour on AI as a revolutionary tool, and my question is, where would we begin to see that in terms of stock valuations or in terms of company performance?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think the first place that you would see it would be in NVIDIA and in the spending numbers from the big tech companies. You know, as long as they keep spending the amounts that they say that they're spending, I feel like investors are willing to hang on to where they are and see, you know, what AI may develop into in a few years, right? But if you see any pullback on that, or if you see, for example, you know, NVIDIA is, you know, they really only sell, most of their sales go to the other Magnificent Seven companies, right? So if
Right.
you see any slowdown in the spending, you're going to see it somewhat in the stock prices of those big tech companies, and then NVIDIA next. And then after that, I mean, if NVIDIA really starts to drop, I think that could be a real sort of scare sign for the
Right.
markets. Yeah.
Right. And we saw this a little bit when China put out its DeepSeek product, and they didn't spend a ton of money adding big data and adding more chips. That Nvidia tanked early, and it was seen as like Nvidia is a leading indicator because you put in the piece, you relate what Nvidia was to what Nvidia is to AI to what Cisco was sort of in the .com era to the build out of telecom for the internet, right? And where the stock valuations went.
Yeah, exactly. So Cisco and NVIDIA kind of have eerie parallels in terms of how they're acting. So Cisco, in the 5-year run-up to the .com crash, briefly became the world's most valuable company, and I think their stock increased over that period something like 15,000% or something like that.
Right.
And what they made were little, basically like the networking equipment. So other people were building the fiber, you know, internet speeds, but for any company to actually take advantage of the new speed, they needed this networking equipment. And Cisco was
Right.
kind of the biggest and best creator of that. So in the same way, like if you want to do anything in AI, you have to have a GPU, right? And NVIDIA controls something like somewhere around between 80 and 90% of the AI chip market, depending on how you're measuring it. So in the same way, yeah, as long as this demand for AI seems limitless, right? So it seemed like up until it crashed, like there was no limit to how many people were trying to get connected to the internet and all that kind of stuff. As long as there's that's going on, then you know NVIDIA is okay. But you know you do have to ask, like with what DeepSeek showed, you know, do we really need this many GPUs at you know the sort of monopoly prices that NVIDIA gets to sell them at, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I think
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, we don't have to guess what it looks like if we don't need that level of GPUs because there was a .com crash and
yeah,
Cisco stock fell 80%. in the wake of that dot-com crash. And we obviously still have an internet. We still have tons of businesses that need to get on the internet to use it. But Cisco became not as central to that process. There wasn't as much money in it. Other ways of dealing with this sort of went around Cisco's networking expertise, and we had a really nasty recession at the beginning of the 2000s. As a result, it was exacerbated later by 9/11 and attendant forces. But even before that, I was working in tech in 2001. I know exactly from where I speak. I was in San Francisco at that time. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the fear here, is that we get a similar up and down. Actually, a friend of mine went back even further for a parallel, and he said this is actually like sort of the 1870s. The technological advances of the late 19th century, which like the railroad and things like that, like an initial craze and then a collapse and then a long-term adaptation, and that's kind of how the internet economy went as well. There was an initial craze and a collapse, and then a long-term adaptation. But we saw real panics in the 1860s and 70s and 80s because of this. So it's very dangerous. And so, Dylan, your piece kind of makes an argument around this, around the politics of AI and where the Democratic Party should be positioning itself. And I want you to make that argument to us, make your case for what Democrats should do about all of these things that we've been talking about for the last hour.
Yeah, no pressure at all. Um, in one of those ironies of writing, was a CNN story that came out at virtually the same time as our article, that was reporting on how energy prices and consumer electricity inflation are becoming incredibly salient electoral issues in
Mm-hmm.
the Virginia and New Jersey elections that are going on right now,
Sure.
and how Chris Wright, the Secretary of Energy, is actually um, has been talking with reporters about how this is Republicans' greatest electoral vulnerability. So I don't think this is something that we're like alone in thinking, but
Right.
the AI industry is incredibly unpopular. It's getting more unpopular. It's increasing people's cost of electricity. It's increasing public health costs. It's already starting to make people sick. It's costing local governments tax revenue. Just on virtually every metric you could possibly look at. This is something that goes against what Democrats say they want their brand to be. And it's really difficult to imagine a better political opportunity for the Democrats than taking aim at companies whose executives are the richest people on earth while they're causing everyone else's energy prices to go up, because it covers the cost of living that has been the most salient electoral factor and something that Democrats have had as a weakness of their own. And it feeds into the enthusiasm around the fight oligarchy stuff that we're seeing from Bernie Sanders at all. So I think in terms of both just polling that out there about what people think of the AI, the merits of what the industry is doing, and in terms of Democrats actually upholding their ideal, it's pretty comprehensively the case. The party should be reaching the conclusion that they can't be friends with the AI industry.
Yeah, and there's a political component to that. I think it lines up very well as you're talking about. There's also a policy component. If you think this is a bubble, you'd want to have it be a slow leak rather than a pop. that's the way to protect the vast majority of the public here, in addition to saving on electricity rates and everything you talked about. And so trying to put limits on this, I mean, obviously in the next 3 years, there's going to be problems at the federal level, but even at the state level, with data center build outs where they have to be placed, trying to place limits on this, I think, can bear some policy fruit, not just electoral fruit. But I want to get into something that I thought was really interesting in your piece, because you talk about the polling on AI. And obviously, the top level numbers show that people are really skeptical of artificial intelligence, sort of writ large. But there's kind of a division in terms of that skepticism, and it plays out along class lines. Could you talk about that?
Yeah. The so people who make more than $200,000 a year, which is the top 15% of the US's income distribution, I think that AI is going to make their lives better by a 3-to-1 margin.
Mm-hmm.
People earning less than $50,000 a year think that AI will make their lives worse by a 2-to-1 margin. And this sort of gets back to the question of, well, if this technology actually does advance beyond the wall that it's seemingly hitting, what's it going to accomplish? And the answer that businesses have been looking for is cutting labor costs. So I think
Right.
that there's a very intuitive, um, it's just very intuitive for people that, oh, labor costs, if I'm making over $200,000, I'm probably in a position where decreasing labor costs are not going to mean me losing my job. If you're making under 50,000, you think that yet again, you are the exact type of person whose job they're trying to automate.
Right.
Um,
The
so I
funny
think
thing
there's,
is that
yeah.
those people making over 200,000 are probably wrong. Like
Hmm.
if AI is going to come for anyone, it's going to come for knowledge workers, because they're the thing it maybe can do mechanically is take data sets and crunch them in ways that right now is senior vice presidents do. That's a funny part of it to me. But the other, I think, very important part of it to me is that we have been having since last November all of these debates about, can Democrats win back the working class? Can they win back voters who have become skeptical of Democrats for whatever reason, cultural affinities, or whatever they are, that attracted them to Donald Trump and right wing populism? Can Democrats become the party of the working class and protect the working class? Well, here's an issue that with this perfect divide between the ownership class, if you will, and the working class. And the working class says, we don't like this idea of moving headlong into AI. And so, just on that level, Democrats have to think about, hey, if we want to be the party of the working class, here's an issue that lines up perfectly for us, where we can be seen as guardians of protectors of working people against a disruptive technology that isn't bringing the benefits that we think it's going to bring anyway, and even if it did, are largely accruing to owners rather than the whole of society.
I think there's a parallel here to the aftermath of the Great Recession, where Democrats were in a similar position vis-a-vis Wall Street, where,
Mm-hmm.
the wealthy donor side of the party didn't want to break up the big banks, didn't want to jail bankers. You had people like Tim Geithner who um, helped to guide the bailout in ways where it benefited financiers more than people whose mortgages um, were
Yeah.
implicated. I think this is a similar situation where you have a group of elite capitalists who, for want of a better term, who are driving a lot of the policy preferences of the elected Democratic Party against the wishes of people the Democrats claim that they want to represent.
Right.
And I think this is something that could be like an entire thesis on its own, drawing this parallel. But I think a lot of the disillusionment with the Democratic Party started with how they seemed to embrace Occupy and things like that. And then you wind up getting type of thing that's revealed in Chicken Shit Club, where
Right.
they just don't actually fight for the people that they say they're
Yeah.
going to represent. And I think that this is another instance where, they're either going to regain some of that credibility or they're going to lose it in the same exact type of way.
Yeah, it's a huge issue, and it sounds like the AI industry is going to follow the lessons of the crypto industry and build a huge war chest of money that they can give to candidates and play in primaries in 2026. It's something it's maybe the most dangerous part of this entire thing. I wish we had time for it, but we don't. I want to thank both of you, Dylan Gyauch-Lewis and Bryan McMahon. You can see both of the stories they wrote for us this week at prospect.org. I believe there are links as well in the chat if you're watching live on YouTube. We do this every week at 12:30 Eastern on Fridays. We're going to put the video of this up on our website. So if you liked what you saw and want to tell other people about it, you can send them to prospect.org and have them listen to it and watch it. But thank you, Bryan and Dylan, very much for being here with us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Absolutely. And we'll see you again next week, and have a great rest of your day and your weekend. Bye.